Welcome into another edition of Inside Tulsa Athletics. I'm Rick Couri, your host, but really just filling a chair from Gil Cloud, the man who sat in it before me. We unfortunately lost Gil in the last week, and we're going to talk about him a lot today with folks from Rogers and Edison and Booker T. Washington from the district office. The legacy of Gil Cloud is going to be covered tremendously here today on Inside Tulsa Athletics. Stick around with us. Back on Inside Tulsa Athletics, I'm Rick Couri. You'll probably recognize the gentleman sitting to my left, Raymond. He's the athletic director at Edison, as well as you can see on the little stripes out there, you've got a couple of extra duties, don't you?
Yes, sir. I'm a junior ROTC instructor there at Edison.
Absolutely. We talked about that last time you were here. Today, though, one of the things we're talking about is a gentleman behind us, Gil Cloud. Somebody else I know you knew, and I want to get some remembrances of Gil and you and what he was supportive of, not just in athletics, but in your ROTC program.
Well, Gil to me, and I was thinking about this the other day, Gil to me, it was like my command sergeant major if I was in the military. Compassionate, hard, fair, care about the program, and didn't hold us to any less standard than nothing but success.
You know, you mentioned something there that's so hard to come by. Someone who can be hard on you and kind to you at the same time. I think people sometimes misunderstand what hard on you means. It means just expecting you to succeed in what you do, to excel in what you do, and then they'll help you in doing that.
That's correct. What Gil did, Gil led by example. He held us to the same standard that he held himself to. And that made us all better as athletic directors. When I'm saying not just the high school, but the middle school as well, we were all the same, and he treated us the same. No one person was bigger than the team. And I love that about Gil.
When you call him for advice, because here's a man who had seen so many different things. He'd been a fundraiser, an athletic director, a coach, had done all that kind of stuff. What kind of questions did you generally ask Gil?
Well, I can't think of really any on the top of my head because I felt like he prepared me when I got into the role. But if there's something that I needed to know, like a rule or something, or if it's something I needed to do that I wasn't sure of, if he didn't answer the phone at that time, because they are always in meetings, I can guarantee you that he's going to call me back.
Sure.
Yeah.
And he also, I mentioned the ROTC program. People don't expect that. It's not really part of athletics, but it's another activity, and that's still something that's important. How was he supportive there?
Well, Gil's in charge. He was in charge of our programs. We all fell under the athletic realm. But Gil was a patriot, okay? He believed in the military. He believed in the United States. And that's something we always talked about. Even when he retired, we would have conversations about, just where the state of the union is. And he was proud of me wearing his suit every day and the things that I did for my country. And that made me feel good to hear that come from him.
At the end of the day, what do you think you learned from him that was most important?
Caring for others. He cared for you no matter who you were. Where you sat on a totem pole, it didn't matter to him. You were in his office, he's going to tell you some stories, and he's going to tell you how to get the job done.
Yeah, you're right about the stories. We've heard an awful lot about that. Do you have any Gil stories that you remember him telling you about?
It's so many, but I just think about, just the stories that he did for us. Mm-hmm. I heard of the stories about in Iowa, at NSU, they were all great stories. But the legacy that he stuck in my heart is what he did for TPS when we were at our troubling time.
And we've mentioned that a couple of times here today. Barry Lewis from the Tulsa World, if you haven't seen that segment yet, you can see that when he talks about that a little bit as well. People don't understand how tough things were. Explain what happened when Gil took over. How did you go from that one spot to the next?
It started with tough love. He held everybody to the same standard. He set rules in place, and you better not violate those rules. And once everybody got comfortable with those rules, everything ran smooth. And the legacy that he set in place is carrying on today. Mick Wilson is following those same guidelines, and Tulsa Public School athletics they're in a great place now with where we are compared to where we were. And it's all because of Gil. Mm-hmm. It's all because of Gil. But Gil came in there, put his foot down, and held us all to a standard. And it took off from there.
It did, and it continues to. So what's happening for you these days at Edison? It's busy. You've got a lot of sports going. You got a lot of sports coming up. Got a lot of sports in playoffs. You must be busy.
Well, swim just finished. We had some placers at swim and state. We have wrestlers that's getting ready to go try to compete this weekend. First female wrestler to make state.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But I'm excited about my soccer program. We have a really good opportunity to repeat. But I don't want to leave out my basketball because like I heard the end of the segment when Barry was talking about basketball. We're on a quite little run now, and we got a good draw, and I think we got a good shot of making it.
That's outstanding. Well, I know without the question, you have great stories and remembrances of Gil as well. Thank you for sharing those with us.
I appreciate it, and I thank Gil and his family for allowing me to be a part of their family.
Absolutely. Raymond Phipps is the athletic director at Edison High School. Back with more Inside Tulsa Athletics coming up. Welcome back to Inside Tulsa Athletics. I'm your host, Rick Couri, and now we're talking about Gil Cloud. We've done that a whole lot today. We're going to continue doing that. Unfortunately, Gil passed away in the last week or so. He was an athletic director at Tulsa Public Schools for an awful long time, and this next gentleman knew him well. John Potocnik. I said it right?
Close.
Potocnik.
Yes.
All right, there we go. John Potocnik, he is the athletic director at Booker T. Washington High School.
Yes.
We've been asking everybody about their remembrances of Gil. Give me some of yours.
Gil, it didn't matter what situation you ever called him about. Number one, he'd make sure he called you back, depending on, even if it's at night and you had a situation. And so, but every time you talk to him, he'd always have stories to tell you too. and so it may be a minute conversation that turned into 15, 20 because he would definitely tell you some stories. And so, which was good. Because it all related to what we were talking about. And so, and that would help you see a bigger picture of what you might need to do. And so, but he always gave you a calming effect.
Yes, and a very positive one as well.
And positive, yes.
When someone who's your boss has been in a position like yours, what kind of difference does that make? And what kind of sage advice or what did Gil bring to that position because of his experience?
Well, he's seen it all. And so that helps. And then the way he would mentor you is, he was always calm and giving great advice on different types of situations that you might encounter. And so, but everything was always positive. And that's a big thing. Even if you might have screwed up a little bit, it was still positive with Gil. And so, I can't ever remember him raising his voice or getting really upset about a situation. Not that we had very many situations, but,
sure.
But everything was positive. And which was key, I think, because he had great communication skills.
Yeah, oh yeah, right. And part of that was just that overall demeanor of how easy he was to be around.
Yes.
He made everything seem pretty simple, didn't he?
Yes, he did. And so, number one, he was always for the kids.
Yes. Oh, yes.
The kids were the first thing, and then a positive outlook for Tulsa Public Schools athletics. And so that was extremely important to him.
Tell me about being the athletic director at a school where, as I mentioned earlier when I was talking with Barry Lewis, everything's rolling. You've got Dan Bitson coaching your football now. You've got Coach Nash in track, who's an absolute legend. You've got Eli in basketball, who's doing great things in swimming. And really, no matter what it is, Booker T is excelling.
It is, and it keeps me extremely busy. And so in all the sports, we are moving forward and doing well. And making great strides, and now that we're back down in 5A, we're making even bigger strides as far as the competition level, and so all of our sports are doing really well. It's a really busy time of year. We qualified 2 for wrestling, which Gil was big about wanting to bring wrestling back to Booker T. So that is important. Our basketball teams are getting ready, are playing in the playoffs, and so they should have good runs at the state tournament. Soccer started, and so the boys were defending state champs last year, so they're off and running, doing scrimmages right now, and then open season next week. And so baseball keeps me busy because I'm the coach also, and so we have a lot of things going on, and the one thing about our staff is they work really well together.
You mentioned being busy, so coaching baseball, obviously that takes part of it, but then as an athletic director, you're an administrator, you're trying to do all those things. What's your average day like? What do you do?
Show up about 7:15 or 7:30 and look at our schedule for the week and make sure buses are scheduled and what time they're supposed to come, and officials, and just, even though I've looked at that for the whole second semester and have it planned out on a chart, I still look at it daily.
Yes. Just
to make sure everything is going to go smoothly for the kids and for the coaches, and so and just looking at kids' grades and making sure they're staying on top of what they need to stay on top of, and so that we don't have no surprises down the road.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's always one of those right there. We're dealing with young people, right? So there are always surprises. What do you think Gil was the most proud of Booker T for?
I think continuing the legacy that we have inherited for many years, and then just the growth of all of our sports. And so, softball coming back in the last so many years, and wrestling coming back, and just trying to grow every sport and have positive people in charge of those sports. And so I just think he was instrumental in a lot of different things to help us continue to grow.
Outstanding. John, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you being here and your remembrances of Gil.
Thank you.
John Potocnik, he is the athletic director at Booker T. Washington High School. Back with more after this on Inside Tulsa Athletics. We're back here on Inside Tulsa Athletics, once again honoring Gil Cloud, the man who sat in this chair before me and after J.V. Haney, two people who are gone but are never going to be forgotten. And part of doing that today is by visiting with someone who I know knew Gil, and that is Willie Hughes. He's an athletic trainer at Tulsa Public Schools. And I want to get into your job first, but we're here to talk a little bit about Gil today, somebody we all are going to miss a great deal. And your dealings with him, I'm assuming, were like the rest of us, just really tremendous.
Yep. I first met Gil in 1977. I was a student at Union High School, and so I graduated in 81, and I was involved in athletics as far as equipment manager and working with the coaches and stuff with that. After graduation and going on, that helped me get a scholarship to be at East Central University Athletic Training Scholarship. Then I came back and was at NEO as a head athletic trainer, and Gil was involved and instrumental in the Mid-America Bowl that was held at Union Tuttle Stadium, and I was head athletic trainer. In 91, NEO was crowned national title there in football. Our paths crossed again in 94 when he replaced the legendary Dr. Jack Dobbins at NSU. I'd only been there a few months when he assumed the helm there, and worked with him from 1994 to 2000. And then as years passed, and then I came to the district as more of a teacher, and then was doing contract work as an athletic trainer, and then recently joined on the sports medicine team in 2023. So, but would still see Gil occasionally, especially when I'd help with TPS and athletics, so they need athletic trainers.
You know, when you had that job at NSU, and you know, as you mentioned, Mr. Dobbins, Dr. Dobbins, he was an absolute legend. But when you get that change and that leadership right above you, there's always that little concern and worry. I'm assuming Gil did a really nice job of putting that kind of aside pretty early.
I think what Gil brought to the position was his experience from the secondary level, athletic administration. He was very positive in bringing in fundraising, getting people involved, helping increasing the facilities, coaching staffs, supportive with me in the medical end that we needed to move forward. I think one thing that people may not was his ability to move us from NAI to NCAA Division II, which a lot of people may not know that. And back then, that was a 3-year process. So we were provisional for 2 years, and then the final year, and then we moved. And it showed in just the ability of the excellence of the student athletes and coaches' abilities to have competitive programs and move things forward, and adding programs there. So women's soccer was added during that time. And so that was a great benefit there. I know that can be difficult from the gentleman he took the reins over, but he did a great job there too.
You know, and it's interesting too, when someone has that positive an attitude, and that was Gil always, no matter what the problem was in front of him, he just smiled and went into it. And somehow that drags everyone else along, doesn't it?
Right. It's very infectious. You know, even when he came here in 2012 and the things that he's been able to do, and also his support in student athletes, coaching staffs, athletic administrators, facilities, being involved with building of facilities, you know, at Rogers High School, other sites, even in the sports medicine end. He's definitely, I was thinking about some of the things he did for us, and his legacy will move forward for us in sports medicine.
What are some of those things he was doing?
I think bringing in, we only had one athletic trainer position, and he brought in Steve Freebus, who's now the director of sports medicine. Along with him, and now our executive athletic director, Mick Wilson, and Steve, the vision was to help the health care of our student athletes at all sites. There are 9 high schools, as you know, 10 junior high, and we're trying to provide coverage at all sites. So it was just Steve, and along the way, and before Gil left, we had increased those numbers. Currently, we are at 9 certified athletic trainers, so a legacy of him, of that, and then making sure we have facilities that we can take care of the needs and the cares of our student athletes throughout the district.
Which right now is a changing process. It's always a changing process. But as you move from winter to spring, what are some of the challenges you face as you have a lot of sports kind of crunching together here?
Well, right now, this is some of the busiest time of year for athletics in our district. Our sports are very competitive at the basketball and wrestling level. And so we're now in regionals, and we'll probably be in an area with some of our programs. Wrestling, we'll be sending some to Oklahoma City this weekend. Starting Saturday, we'll have baseball probably starting. Soccer will start next week. Track and field. It's supposed to have, at Hale, where I'm at right now, it's supposed to have a meet at Rogers on March 8th. So just trying to get that finished and move forward and cover that. And then get ready for the next year, which will be shortly, come upon us in May, and getting things ready in the summer for the fall sports.
And that's exactly what we're going to be doing every day, every year. It's just the way it works. Well, thank you for your memories of Gil and for your work, and keep them straight over at Nathan Hale.
I will. Thank you.
Coming back soon with more right here on Inside Tulsa Athletics. We're back here on Inside Tulsa Athletics. I'm Rick Couri, your host, but really I'm just the guy sitting in the chair after the guy who you see behind me, and that is Gil Cloud, who we're honoring here today, who was the man who ran this show for so long and was the athletic director at Tulsa Public Schools for such a long time. Like the young lady we have with us now, Nikki Dennis, knew Gil very well, a former Rogers principal, director of graduation outcomes from TPS, which we'll definitely get into. But we're here to honor Gil today and talk an awful lot about Gil. So when did you first meet the legend himself?
So I first met Gil probably the first week that I came to Rogers in August of 2014. I was new to Tulsa. I came from Albuquerque. I had been a high school administrator there for a long time as well, and had been a high school principal at a comprehensive high school, which ironically had the same colors as Rogers. I'm sporting the blue and gold,
sure,
royal blue and gold.
We're in the Roper colors now.
Just like Ropers. Anyway, Gil came to see me, wanted to talk to me about athletics at Rogers. Jen Sanders, who eventually was one of the administrators at TPS, was my athletic director then, and just came in to visit with me and kind of introduced me to TPS athletics, kind of get to know my background and where I stood on athletics. And he was a great mentor for me as I became a principal in Tulsa. I've always seen a strong connection between high school success and athletic programs and extracurricular programs. I had a background before I became an administrator. I was a teacher, but I also was the activities director for 2 high schools in Albuquerque. So I'd always had really believed in the relationship between kids that are engaged in athletics and activities and their success. And so Gil kind of mentored me when I first came here, and we had a lot in common, and just over the years became a great supporter of me and a great friend and a great supporter of Tulsa Public Schools athletics.
I don't think people understand how important it is that an AD do exactly what he did, which is go to talk to a principal. Not everyone in academia is excited about athletics, and being able to bridge that gap is something that's very rare.
It is, and it was very different than my experience in my previous district. The athletic directors there were a little bit more disassociated with the schools. Not that they didn't provide support, but it was a different kind of support. Their support more was in terms of working with the athletic association at the state level and making sure that we had games scheduled and the kind of administrative aspects. I had never been with an athletic director like Gil in my experiences as a principal that really was interested in developing the program at the school and developing the athletes at the school. And I feel like that's what he brought to all of our schools, not just to his alma mater, Rogers, but to all of our schools. He had that passion for building programs for all kids.
I'm not sure there was an athletic director like Gil. I'm not sure that's the case.
He's one of a kind.
You mentioned something there I think is important as well. And we've heard this in colleges. Say a university does really well, enrollment goes up. I don't think people understand the way that works in high school. Explain why it works.
Absolutely. So when I first came to Rogers, I don't know if people remember, but in 2011, they closed the doors for Rogers and they reopened it, and it became Will Rogers College High School. And the goal was to, we were kind of a different kind of magnet, more like Thoreau.
Yes.
So we had a reading. It was at that time a 7 through 12, and we had a reading score that you needed, but it was very minimal. Anyway, at that point when I came, it was a very small enrollment. And when Dr. Ballard hired me, he said, my goal is for you to grow Rogers. My goal is that if this school is going to survive, you need to grow it. So I was the third principal at Rogers. Dr. Benson, who works for TPS, was principal there for 2 years, and then they had another principal, and then I took over. And the enrollment there was pretty small, and so my job was to grow that enrollment, and I knew from my experience at other high schools, and also from my own kids' experience as an athlete and mine as an athlete, that school pride is related to how well the band does, the football team does, the orchestra. And so by growing athletic programs and getting success at Rogers, I was able to attract students to the school. And now today Rogers has a steady enrollment. And honestly, the very first year there, I was going to be on the streets that say we take students. And today, they have more students applied than they needed. And I believe that's because of the relationship between athletics and activities, because I consider both of them the same, and student interest in school.
Now, we've only got about a minute left, but Director of Graduation Outcomes. Explain what that means.
So what I do as the Director of Graduation Outcomes is I'm responsible for recovering dropouts, for finding pathways to student success, for credit recovery, for helping schools find what the barriers are to graduation, for identifying ways to make sure our kids are interested and engaged in school. So I work with all the high schools and the alternative schools in Tulsa. Last summer we ran a credit recovery program and graduated about 200 kids after June, and we're going to expand that program.
Wow, that is tremendous. You know what? I'm going to have you come back because I want to ask you about your favorite Hatch green chili recipe.
I will tell you that.
Talk about how you got the hair like that, because I'm digging it.
Okay.
And I got to get more into that sometime. Thank you very much for your time.
And I just
today.
want to say I love Gil.
Of course, we all did.
Thank
and
you.
still do. Nikki Dennis, former Rogers principal, now Director of Outcomes, Graduation Outcomes at Tulsa Public Schools. Back with more right after this. We're back here on Inside Tulsa Athletics. I'm Rick Couri, your host, as we honor Gil Cloud, the man who sat in this chair before me and just after J.V. Haney on this program. And we're going to do it with someone who knew Gil as well as I did, or probably anybody else, Barry Lewis of the Tulsa World. And I was thinking on the way over here, Barry, you and I have been around long enough. We both remember when Union was a pasture, literally. And Gil Cloud is one of the people who helped build that into what it is today. When I say his name, I know that's one of the first things that pops into your mind, but you have a lot of background with him. What comes up first when I say his name?
Visionary. And that goes back to those days when I first met Gil in the mid-1980s when I was covering high school sports for the evening newspaper, the Tulsa Tribune.
Right.
And Gil was athletic director at Union. And to me, when I look back in those days, Gil was just such ahead of his time. And in fact, him being athletic director at Union, that was a bold move by the Union administration, a very visionary move by them. Because back then, I know it's hard to imagine now, but back then, most of the times, the athletic directors were either current coaches or they were retired coaches who were just looking to transition the last few years before retiring altogether. But Gil was really a rarity back then, someone who was just focused on being athletic director, even though he had coached a little before coming to Union, but he was really... That was his main focus. And during his time there, he really brought Union from being a 3A school to being the large school athletic department, dominating athletic department that they've been for the last 30 or 40 years. And he was just so ahead of his time in so many ways.
It was interesting. I'm glad you mentioned the visionary part, and not only that, the part about him being both. Because you're right, there were a lot of coaches just biding their time, trying to take a paycheck toward the end. Nothing against you guys. Hey, it's okay. Yeah. But what he was an administrator / coach / supporter. Because at his core, he was an athletic supporter. He loved the kids.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all throughout the years, I mean, that was just so important. Not just student athletes were first and foremost in his decisions, and not just what they did on the playing field or on the basketball court, but in the classroom. One of the things I remember when he was at Union, when I was calling him one day to tell him that Bob Cleland, who was the basketball coach at the time, and who had been a former coach at what is now Missouri State, he was going to be the Tulsa Tribune's Coach of the Year. And he had really taken the basketball program to new levels there. And Gil was excited, obviously, by what Bob had done on the court, but he was just as excited about what he was doing in the classroom and how the kids loved to take his classes, and what a great classroom teacher he was. And he was, I forget what exactly he was teaching. He was teaching some type of class that would have been way above me, what I could have taken. But that was just so important for Gil, not just what student athletes did on the field, but in the classroom too.
Sure, yeah. And when you talk about what he did out there at Union, some of what they initially did in the building of Union Tuttle and some of those things were beyond visionary, because that was the outskirts of Tulsa at that point. It truly was a suburban school. And to be able to see in your mind what was going to happen there, to me, that's one of his most brilliant things.
Oh, absolutely. And he was always thinking outside of the box. And do you remember the Mid-America Bowl?
Oh, of course.
Yes. He was a driving force in bringing the National Junior College Championship football game to Union. It was there for like 4, 5, 6 years. Yep. And that was such a great event. I mean, that was just so far, one of the things that Gil did that was just so far ahead of its time. Mm-hmm. And I wish we still had it today.
Yes, yes.
That would be such a neat event to have. We had some really good players come through that game, like Leon Lett. But he just was always thinking ahead all through his 40 years that I knew him, whether it be at Union or Tulsa Public Schools.
It was never anything but about as we said, the kids and the fun. I don't think I ever saw him not smiling.
Oh, that's a great point. Absolutely. He was always so positive and are trying to find the positive point of things, even when things were not looking so great. And I think that's one of the attributes that helped him guide TPS through some tough times that led to him being initially hired on an interim basis as athletic director in 2012. And he's always such an idea person. I remember he sitting with him on the day he was hired. He actually came over to me just fittingly. Happened to be covering a Rogers basketball game that night. There's an open seat next to me. He comes over and sits. Even though we had talked a long time at the press conference, I believe, or that was held earlier that day. But anyway, he starts asking me my thoughts and all these ideas he had. I kept on thinking, well, you're only supposed to be here for 4 or 5 months. How are you going to get all these ideas accomplished in 4 or 5 months? And of course, what was supposed to be 4 or 5 months, thankfully for TPS, wound up being 9+ years, and he was able to implement a lot of those ideas.
Yeah, and it was Dr. Ballard who was able to get him to take that job, and that was fun too. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk some more with Barry. We're not done with him yet. We're going to get into some good old basic high school sports because we got playoffs and such coming up. It'll be that next year on the pardon me, up here next on Inside Tulsa Athletics. Back here on Inside Tulsa Athletics, that's the actual name of the show, not the thing I tried to goof up here a little bit earlier. I'm Rick Couri, the host, along with Barry Lewis, as we are talking about Gil Cloud, the man behind both of us, the man who sat in this chair for a long, long time. Of course, right after J.V. Haney, 2 legends who have been here. And also, of course, Gil running Tulsa Public Schools as the athletic director for many, many years. We talked a lot about Gil. Before we leave that topic, the last thing I want to ask you, Barry, is what do you think his ongoing legacy will be for the district?
Just as the Tulsa Public Schools athletics continues to go strong, I think that'll be his legacy because it was really in trouble when he became athletic director in 2012, and he cleaned up a lot of things and did a lot of things in order for it to grow, like overseeing all the new facilities that are being built. So when these facilities go on into hopefully are used for many, many years, and people will look and remember Gil's part in having those facilities being built, just as well as all the other things that he helped launch, like the Tulsa Public Schools Athletics Hall of Fame.
Yes.
That celebrates TPS's great athletic history.
Yeah. And I know we talked about this a little bit on the show with some of the other guests. People don't understand how important activities, not just athletics now, activities, whether that's band or cheer or whatever it is, but athletics too, are to a school, to a program. And you're right. I don't think people understand what was happening there. And to just see that thriving from the standpoint of numbers and enrollment and people wanting to go play, I think that's big.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, so many times throughout the years, I've heard principals say that, especially for schools that aren't necessarily used to having a lot of football success, and when they finally enjoy that football success, they will remark there just seems to be an extra enthusiasm in the hallways in those falls. So football success does make a difference. I mean, it's not a be-all and end-all, but it can put a little extra pep in your step.
Yeah, it definitely can. There's some pep in the step right now from basketball playoffs. You've been in the arena with me a couple of times this year as I'm broadcasting Union basketball, and you've been there to watch some of those. But it's specifically at Tulsa Public Schools. We continue to see Memorial do really well, Booker T do really well. As we near tournament time, what do you think?
Yes, I mean, there's a real strong possibility in 5A boys that there could be 4 TPS teams make it to state. That would be pretty incredible. Of course, Booker T. Washington is the favorite. Forget that they've lost 7 games. 5 of those were to national powers. Right. Booker T is a strong favorite, but then you've got the perennial power and contender Memorial. Mm-hmm. Then you've got Rogers having arguably its best season so far in almost 30 years in boys basketball. Right. And then you've got East Central having arguably its best season in over a decade as well. So those 4 teams definitely have a real shot at making the state tournament, as well as Edison, which is really coming on strong at the end of the season.
What is it? What's the secret sauce at Booker T and Memorial and places like that where Eli and Bobby have just been consistently so successful?
And well, again, this sort of gets back to Gil and now Mick Wilson, the athletic director, the people who are running those programs. Gil was part of the hiring process that led to Eli Brown being named Booker T Central's coach first, and he led Central to a state championship, and then on to Booker T, as well as Bobby Allison at Memorial, and just laying the foundation that Gil and Mick have laid the foundation for a lot of success. And I mean, head coach has a huge part of that.
Yep, there's no doubt. What do you see for basketball, or pardon me, for baseball, for track, or some of the other stuff for TPS coming up?
I think in soccer is another sport where TPS has thrived. I mean, it looks like, I've got to admit, I haven't taken a really deep dive into the spring sports yet until basketball ends.
This is enough right now.
Yeah. But I think just the way things have been trending, the future is very bright, especially the short-term future and long-term. But looking ahead to this spring, the future is bright for the TPS and spring sports, especially track. I've heard some really good things about track.
Yeah, we were talking about that actually. Booker T's track coach was here with us last time we were on, and we were talking about some of the history of success. Again, where I graduated from Nathan Hale had fantastic track and baseball back in those days. And then you're looking too at what Booker T has always been able to do. But right now out there at Booker T, with Dan Bitson being added, with Eli doing what he's doing, what they do in cross country and track, that whole program is really, really rolling.
Yes, Greg Nash, who's run the track program there for 30 plus years. Yep. He's done such a tremendous job, and also done a fine job with the Ring of Honor. Mm-hmm. Talk about remembering your rich sports history.
Sure.
And that's what they've been able to do at Booker T.
All right, Barry, it's always good to have you around. I guess the last thing I'll ask is, if somebody were to ask you your favorite thing about Gil Cloud and to sum it up in a sentence, what would you say?
Just that he was great to work with. I guess I'll be from a selfish point of view. I mean, not only did he do a great job in Tulsa Public Schools and things that can easily be seen, but he was just great to work with from a media standpoint. Couldn't ask for anyone better.
There's no doubt. Barry Lewis, couldn't ask for anyone better than you either. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Rick.
All right, coming back with more on Inside Tulsa Athletics next. back here on Inside Tulsa Athletics. I am Rick Couri, your host, but I'm really just the guy who's filling the chair the gentleman behind me filled for so many years, and that, of course, is Gil Cloud. Joining me now is the guy who also filled his chair a little bit later on as the athletic director, and you just mentioned to me off the air, this is so difficult. You guys were together, I mean, literally every day. It was like a work marriage for so many years.
Rick, it was, and this has been a little tough for me the last few days, but I've learned from what I consider probably one of the 2 or 3 best bosses, supervisors, mentors that I've ever been around in my life. And at age nearly 60, I've been around a lot of impactful people in my life, but Gil Cloud will go down probably as number 1 in my book. He the epitome of class, the epitome of leadership, just everything that I try to exude comes a lot from him. I will say that Gil was a tremendous influence on my career. Wouldn't be where I'm at today without a lot of the things that I learned and picked up from him. But early on, whenever I started my career working with Gil, obviously at that point he was at least 40 plus years in the field of education. And so I literally told people, they asked me what it's like to work for Gil Cloud, and I said, you know what, I don't say a lot. I keep my mouth closed and my ears open so that I can take his 40 years of experience and make them mine. Right. And so early on, that's really what I tried to do.
And you've heard or will hear today an awful lot about Gil's stories. I don't think what people really often realize is, yeah, those were stories because that's just Gil and he told stories, but they all somehow added to whatever that conversation was and had something that you could take from it to use, didn't they?
No question. I mean, his stories, Gil's modus operandi was that he would tell you a story based on something that maybe happened 25 years ago that would be relevant today. Correct. Or how he could make something relate. And so he always had a method to his madness. He might get off on a tangent a little bit somewhere on a storytelling spree, but he would always bring it back to making a point. And I would say that when Gil and Lisa Norman, our administrative assistant, started together down this path, that's one thing that Lisa and I would always talk about, was we would learn something from Gil's stories. And if it wasn't both of us in the office getting a story, yes, I'd get to work or she would get to work, and one of us would already be in there hearing a story early in the morning. And so, the great thing about that is along the way, we got to make some great stories with him. And so, yes, Gil was a great storyteller, as you've well heard today. And that's another great art of leadership, is people being able to tell stories to make them relatable and relevant to what you're currently doing.
You mentioned something earlier, and I think this is really fascinating. Coaches will, and you hear this term now an awful lot, self-scout. You mentioned things that you learned from Gil and kind of coming in initial from him. If you self-scout yourself right now, how different were you from day one to when Gil, if you will, completed your teaching, you became the athletic director? And what do you think the biggest changes were, Mick?
I tell you one thing that I learned about Gil, Rick, and I'm people that know me, and I still say some of them, we all have faults, but I'm not a very good multitasker, and never have been. I'm a checklist guy. I like to get one thing done and move to the next. And so in that realm, learning to multitask better was one huge thing. But I tell you, probably the biggest thing is Gil was the master of slow playing. He wasn't very reactive sometimes. He could slow play things, not let it stress him out, and he was always he was a cool hand Luke. He could just he might be kicking his feet underneath the water like a duck, but he looked as smooth as he could be on top. And Gil was really good about slow playing things and saying, let's work through this slowly before being too reactive. And I've learned to do that because there's times that I've not been that way, but that's probably one of the biggest things is learning to multitask and learning to slow play things sometimes, because being reactive is not always the best thing to do.
Count to 10.
Absolutely.
Always count to 10. What's the biggest legacy he leaves?
I think, I talked about Lisa and myself and Gil walking into a situation. I think his legacy, he came to Tulsa Public Schools in the right time. He was exactly what we needed. He tells the famous story where he walked into the room to meet with Dr. Ballard, and he was just going to be the interim athletic director. Right. And by the end, Dr. Ballard threw the keys across the table to him and said, it's yours. And so he came at a time that was needed. He brought a lot of stability and leadership, and probably more than that, he brought a lot of wisdom and experience, and was able to really put us on a path back to success and where we needed to be.
This happens to everybody when somebody is gone. Have you had that moment yet where you were going to pick up the phone to call them and you realized?
Well, Not yet. I haven't gotten to that because what really bothered me is that I talked to him just the night before. We sometimes, in the rush of life, there's sometimes that I'm not able to return his text, but I was always trying to be diligent about returning his calls because that was something that Gil was really good about as well. So I just talked to him the night before, and so just the news the next day or so when Lisa called me and this all happened, it was a pause moment for me. I wasn't even in town; I was in Kansas City, and so it just stopped me to pause. And I don't want to get too emotional now, but it was a tough moment, and I'm sure that time's coming because there's been so many times when you're dealing with a problem that you want to call him or pick his brain, and he's always been there for that.
Right. And of course, memorial services and things happening, but he will be remembered around the district. I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't a name or a stadium or something else coming up in the future that had some of that name on there, huh?
I could see that those conversations either have taken place or will take place in the future, and obviously there's been some nice articles written about him already, but again, we want to give Gil his due. And he's going to leave quite a legacy in Tulsa Public Schools, that's for sure.
And so is this gentleman right here, Mick Wilson, the current athletic director. We'll be back in a moment with more on Inside Tulsa Athletics. Back here on Inside Tulsa Athletics, I'm Rick Couri, your host, but as I said, just filling the chair of Gil Cloud. We lost Gil just a few days ago. As a matter of fact, we're going to be talking about his viewing and memorial service coming up. The current athletic director and a man who knew Gil as well as just about anybody is Mick Wilson. He's still with us here. We continue on. And I know one of the things you wanted to talk about, Mick, is you've been not just fortunate enough to know Gil, but you've been close to the family, and they've included you.
They have. They've been really good to me, whether it's been Vicki or Matt or Kim. The grandkids, just gotten to know them all so well, and they've always been good to me. And he even reached out to me that I feel fortunate to be able to assist and be part of the endeavor of the memorial and some of the service planning. And again, they've been really good to me, and I have nothing but respect and love for their family. And again, my heart always goes out to them because I always tried to thank Gil tried to thank Vicki and Matt and Kim for allowing me to be part of that family and for them to share someone who's almost like a second father to me, to be involved in his life, and just so giving, and again, just so thankful for that.
And him involved in yours. You mentioned, you're grateful from your heart. That's one of the things he was there for you for.
Absolutely. I was dealt a crazy blow in 2015 when I had a birth defect in my heart that was never discovered until I turned almost 50, and had to have a valve replacement and had an aneurysm. I was actually a walking time bomb. And going through that, Gil and Lisa and all the families and the people that work there at Tulsa Public Schools, really led by Gil, being in the waiting room, being there with me, being there in recovery, and going through a really scary moment in my life with an aneurysm is no laughing matter, obviously. No. And just to know that Gil led that charge and so many people supporting me and getting me through that time was another moment in my life that I'll never forget and that I'm very thankful for.
We're going to get into when the actual memorial service and the viewing will be. I mean, we're taping this show, so there are different times as that's going to be running. But the actual memorial service will be Saturday. That is March 1st. But the actual the viewing will be today. That's the day this show is airing the first time, and that is February 28th. Tell people about those.
Oh, that will be at Floral Haven, which is where Gil had arranged to Gil, always being the ultimate planner, had laid out a lot of this already, and we appreciate all that he's done. But I tell you, such a legacy. But they'll be at Floral Haven on Friday, today, from 4 to 7 p.m. Family will be receiving friends and acquaintances and everyone that wants to come out and remember Gil and see probably some great pictures and videos and things. And then, of course, the memorial service will be at noon at Will Rogers High School in the RAC, which is the new gymnasium there, and it'll be a great experience and a great celebration of someone that's lived a full and long life, and so we're looking forward to that as well on Saturday at noon at Will Rogers High School.
That is, once again, February 28th and then March 1st. We want to make sure you are aware of those two things, and you're welcome to go out. And look, you're going to find out if you go out there, you're going to run into all kinds of people you never knew. Gil knew you, Gil knew them, Gil knew them, because there's going to be a lot of that out there, Mick.
Well, part of what I've been trying to coordinate on my end is just part of that service for the family, and already I went ahead in the line just because I'm anticipating such a big crowd. We'll have chairs on the floor for a lot of the elderly folks to be able to be seated down on the floor, and obviously we want younger people that are more able to sit up in the bleachers. But one big thing through all this is I went ahead and got 2 security guards, not for security for the event, but for traffic. I just think the traffic in that Will Rogers neighborhood, and during that time, people trying to find parking and things, I anticipate a large crowd. So we've lined up traffic police security folks to be able to help us in and out. And the folks at Will Rogers have been great to reach out and help me get this pulled off, as well as some of the district officials. Dr. Johnson called me, and she obviously wanted us to be a part of this and help move this along. So Gil was so well respected and so well liked throughout the district that everyone has been on board about helping with this event, Rick. So we're excited about honoring and giving him his due.
And he's going to get that due at one of the busiest times for you guys. You got basketball, you got swimming, you got track. Swimming's just wrapping. You got things getting underway. You got things starting. You got. You're just nuts right now, aren't you?
It's crazy. The basketball playoffs again are phenomenal for the first time. And I know Barry and I talked about it, and he mentioned again on the show. I really feel like this is the first time in a long time where we could capture all 4 spots to go to the East State tournament on the 5A boys. And so we're excited about those opportunities, because we're really, if everyone plays well like they can, we'll have 5 teams playing for 4 spots out of Tulsa Public Schools. And of course, our girls basketball with Booker T. Washington and Will Rogers girls are strong and have been to the state tournament the last several years. So exciting times there. And then of course, our swimming just wrapped with some success there. And probably a great thing that we're looking forward to is our soccer. Our soccer has become so dominant in the state that we're looking forward to a great soccer season. And of course, we have track starting. So yes, you're right, Rick. There's a lot of things going on right now throughout the district for sure.
And wrestling, you got wrestlers.
Yes, we got wrestlers going to state tournament, and both on the female and the male side. So I think it's going to be a great time for some winter success.
All right, so let's one more time just tell you that the actual viewing will be today. This show is airing the first time that's February 28th, and that is going to be 4 to 7 at Floral Haven.
Yes.
And then the service at Will Rogers High School on Saturday. That'll be the 1st of March, and which is tomorrow if you're watching this show, and that'll be at 1 o'clock, I believe.
That's correct.
That's right.
The memorial at noon.
At noon, pardon me, at noon. All right, so let's make sure we get that right. That's going to be at noon on Saturday. Thanks very much again for Mick for being here.
Thank you, Rick. We've all had big shoes to fill, you included, and we want to thank Gil for everything that he ever did for any of us.
Absolutely, and you'll see some of that coming up coming up next here on Inside Tulsa Athletics. So that's going to do it for another edition of Inside Tulsa Athletics. Thanks again to Barry Lewis, the Tulsa World, and the folks who have been with us today. You're going to see a little bit and hear a little bit of Gil Cloud and some of what he did on this show, as we remembered a lot. I'm the former Tulsa Public Schools athletic director, as well as the man who hosted this show before me. Personally, let me just say I love the man, and I know so many others who did. Thank you, Gil, for all of us here at Tulsa, Inside Tulsa Athletics.
I want to say in this last 15 seconds, I want to thank everyone who has supported our program through the years that we've been here. I don't know if this will be my last show or not, but it could be. And so if so, support high school athletics, get out and be in your community, and when those stadium light comes on in the fall, make sure you're there to support our kids.